The final payment cleared at 9 in the morning. John Cutter closed the laptop, the soft click echoing in the sterile silence of the motel room. He had sold everything. The house that was never a home. The furniture that held no memories he cared to keep. The truck that had carried him away from a life he no longer recognized. All of it was gone, liquidated into a single number in a bank account, most of which was now gone too. He had bought a ghost. A town called Solitude, nestled deep in the forgotten folds of the Nevada desert. A collection of sun-bleached skeletons clinging to a dry riverbed. A place where the world had moved on and left the bones behind. It was perfect. He looked at the dog lying by the door. Thor. A German shepherd with a coat the color of sable and eyes that held the same quiet ghosts as his own. The dog's head was on his paws, but his ears twitched, tracking the groan of an ice machine down the hall. Thor was the only thing Cutter hadn't sold. He was the only thing that wasn't for sale. A retired military working dog, a partner, a witness. The last living piece of a life that had ended in the dust and fire of a faraway country. Cutter stood and grabbed the single duffel bag by the bed. It contained 3 changes of clothes, a satellite phone, a medical kit, and a locked hard case. Everything a man needed. "Let's go, boy," he said. The words were gravelly from disuse. Thor was on his feet in an instant, his tail giving a single controlled wag. He knew the tone. It was time to move. The drive to Solitude took 4 hours. The asphalt gave way to grated dirt, and then the dirt gave way to a barely there trail choked with sagebrush. The world grew quiet. The sky grew bigger. Cutter felt the tightness in his chest loosen with every mile marker he left behind. This was what he had paid for. The silence. The emptiness. He parked his new, battered Jeep in front of what the old maps called the general store. The windows were boarded over, the porch roof sagging like a tired old man. Dust devils danced down the only street. It was a graveyard of ambition, and Cutter felt a strange kinship with the place. He got out, and Thor immediately began his patrol, nose to the ground, quartering the area with practiced efficiency. Cutter walked the length of the street, his boots kicking up dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. He touched the splintered wood of the saloon, peered into the darkness of the blacksmith's shop. He was the king of a dead kingdom, the sole resident of a town named Solitude. It was a fitting title. He had chosen the old sheriff's office as his own. It was built of stone and had held up better than the wooden structures. As he was testing the rusted lock, Thor stopped dead. The dog was 50 yards away, near a cluster of collapsed homesteads at the edge of town. His body was rigid, a low growl vibrating in his chest. His focus was absolute, locked on a small, dilapidated cabin half hidden by a stand of withered cottonwoods. Cutter's hand went instinctively to the place on his hip where a sidearm used to be. Old habits. He walked toward Thor, his steps measured, his eyes scanning every shadow. The silence he had just been enjoying was now filled with a low, humming tension. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Thor didn't move. He just stared at the cabin. Cutter heard it then. A voice, sharp and angry. Then another, softer voice, pleading. He moved with a fluid silence that belied his size, using the crumbling walls for cover until he was within earshot. He peered around the edge of a collapsed smithy. 3 men. 2 were big, dressed in dusty jeans and work shirts. The third was slender, wearing expensive boots and a clean, pressed shirt that looked ridiculous in the middle of a ghost town. He was holding a young woman by the arm, her bare feet scrambling for purchase in the dirt. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her face was pale with terror. "This is the last time I'm telling you, Lily," the well-dressed man said, his voice a venomous hiss. "The land is mine. You're a squatter. You will sign the papers, or I will drag you out of here myself. It was my grandfather's," she choked out. "He never sold it. Please, Mr. Thorne, just leave us alone." "Us?" Thorne laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "There is no us. There's just you, and you are leaving. Today." He yanked her arm hard, pulling her off balance. She cried out, a small, desperate sound that cut through the desert air. And that's when Thor broke. He moved like a black streak, a blur of fur and teeth covering the 50 yards in seconds. He didn't bark. He didn't posture. He launched himself at the man holding the girl, a silent, four-legged projectile of pure protective instinct. One of the thugs shouted a warning, but it was too late. Thor hit Thorne's side, not with his teeth, but with the full force of his 85-pound body. The impact knocked Thorne off his feet, forcing him to release the girl. She scrambled away, collapsing near the cabin door. Thorne hit the ground with a grunt of pained surprise. Before he could recover, Thor stood over him, lips curled back from his teeth, a growl now ripping from his chest that sounded like tearing metal. Thorne's face, a mask of arrogant surprise, twisted into pure rage. He scrambled backward, kicking his expensive boots at the dog. "Get this thing off me!" he shrieked. One of the thugs moved forward, but Thor feinted toward him, never taking his eyes off Thorne. The thug froze. Thorne saw his opening. As Thor shifted his weight, Thorne lashed out with his foot. It wasn't a panicked kick. It was deliberate, vicious. The steel-toed boot connected with Thor's ribs with a sickening thud. The dog yelped, a sharp cry of pain, and stumbled sideways. He tried to stay on his feet, but his back leg buckled. He went down, whining softly, his eyes still fixed on the man who had hurt him. The girl screamed, and John Cutter stepped out from behind the wall. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked toward them, his face a blank canvas, his eyes as cold and flat as river stones. The two thugs turned, their bravado from a moment ago evaporating. They saw the way he moved. They saw the set of his shoulders. They were bullies, not fighters, and they knew instantly that they were out of their league. "That's enough," Cutter said. His voice was quiet, but it carried an impossible weight. It was the voice of a man who had given orders in situations where the wrong tone meant death. Thorne scrambled to his feet, brushing dust from his shirt. His face was flushed with fury and humiliation. "Who the hell are you? This is private property." "No," Cutter said, his eyes flicking from Thorne to the injured dog, then to the terrified girl. "It's my property. I own it, all of it." He stopped about 10 feet away. He didn't take a fighting stance. He just stood there, perfectly balanced, perfectly still. And in his stillness, there was a promise of violence more terrifying than any threat. Thorne's eyes narrowed. "You're the one who bought this dump? I made an offer on this land months ago." "Your offer wasn't accepted," Cutter said. He looked at the girl. "Are you all right?" She nodded, clutching her arm, tears streaming down her face. Cutter's gaze settled back on Thorne. "You and your men will get in your vehicle. You will leave my property, and you will not come back." Thorne laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You don't know who I am. I own this valley. I own the sheriff. I own the judges. You just bought a pile of dirt, old man, but I'm the one who says what happens on it." "Get out," Cutter said again. The words were not a request. One of the thugs, trying to regain some semblance of authority, took a step forward. Maybe you didn't hear him. Cutter's eyes moved to him. They didn't blink. He just looked at the man, and the man stopped walking. He took an involuntary step back. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of men in bars just before everything went wrong. Thorne saw it too. He was a predator, but a predator who preyed on the weak. He sensed, with animal instinct, that this man was not weak. He was something else entirely, something dangerous. He made a show of straightening his shirt. "This isn't over," he sneered. "You have no idea what you've just stepped into." He turned and stalked back to his gleaming pickup truck parked on the trail. His two men followed him like chastened dogs. Cutter didn't watch them go. The moment they turned their backs, they ceased to be a threat. He walked to Thor. He knelt, running his hands gently over the dog's side. Thor whimpered, licking his hand. Cutter's touch was practiced, checking for broken bones, for the telltale sign of a punctured lung. The ribs were likely broken, definitely bruised, but the breathing was steady. He would live. A cold, controlled rage settled deep in Cutter's gut. It was an old, familiar feeling, a feeling he had come here to escape. He looked up at the girl. She was still on the ground, huddled against the cabin wall. He rose and walked over to her, his movements slow, deliberate. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to crowd her. "My name is John Cutter." "Lily," she whispered. Her eyes were wide, fixed on his face. She was looking for a threat, for the other shoe to drop. She had known nothing but threats for a very long time. He saw the fading bruises on her cheek, the fear that was etched so deeply into her features it seemed a permanent part of her. He looked from her to his injured dog, the only being on earth he truly cared for. And he saw the through line, the bully, the victim, the innocent. It was a story as old as time, a story he had been a part of in too many countries, on too many dark nights. He had thought he was done with that story. He had thought he had earned his solitude. He was wrong. He crouched down, keeping his distance, so his eyes were level with hers. "You're safe now," he said, and the words were not just a comfort, they were a contract. "This ends today. I promise you." She stared at him, a flicker of something he hadn't seen yet, hope dawning in her eyes. She believed him, because his voice held no doubt. It held only the calm, unshakable certainty of a promise that would be kept, no matter the cost. Later that evening, the satellite phone buzzed. Cutter was sitting on the porch of the sheriff's office, cleaning a small wound on Thor's side. The dog was lying quietly, his head on Cutter's lap. Lily was inside the cabin, the first place she had felt safe in months. Cutter answered the call. The number was blocked. "Mr. Cutter." The voice was smooth, confident. It was Thorne. "I trust you've had some time to reconsider your position." "There's nothing to reconsider," Cutter said. "Everyone has a price," Thorne said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "I'm a reasonable man. I'll double what you paid for that wasteland. 100% profit for a day's work. You walk away, and we forget this afternoon ever happened." Cutter gently stroked Thor's head. The dog sighed softly. "The girl stays. The land is mine. You stay away." Thorne's amusement vanished. "You're making a grave mistake. You think you're some kind of hero? Some tough guy? I will bury you in legal fees. I will have that girl arrested for trespassing. I will have your dog put down for being a dangerous animal. I will make your life a living hell until you are begging to sell." Cutter was silent for a long moment. He listened to the wind whistling through the ghost town. He listened to the steady breathing of his dog. You're right, Cutter said finally. I'm not a hero. He paused. But you've confused my desire for peace with an inability to make war. You put your hands on her again. You come near my dog again. You set one foot on this property again, and you will learn the difference. I promise you that. He ended the call before Thorne could reply. He tossed the phone onto the worn wooden bench beside him. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of blood orange and bruised purple. The war had followed him home. The next morning, Cutter drove Lily into the nearest town, a place called Red Rock. It was a one-sheriff, one-diner kind of town, the kind of place where secrets were currency and outsiders were viewed with suspicion. The sheriff's department was a squat, cinder-block building with a dusty American flag hanging limply from a pole out front. Sheriff Brody was a large man whose uniform seemed a size too small, his face permanently flushed, his eyes small and wary. Cutter laid out the facts calmly and precisely. The harassment, the assault he had witnessed, the name Marcus Thorne. Brody listened, leaning back in his creaking chair, steepling his fingers over his considerable gut. He didn't take a single note. When Cutter was finished, the sheriff sighed, a long, weary sound. "Son," he said, his tone dripping with condescending patience. "Marcus Thorne owns the biggest ranch in this county. He employs half this town. He's a pillar of the community." He glanced at Lily, who shrank under his gaze. This girl's been squatting on his property line for months. He's been very patient with her. Sounds to me like he finally lost that patience. "I witnessed an assault," Cutter stated, his voice flat. "You witnessed a landowner trying to remove a trespasser," Brody corrected. "As for your dog, Nevada is a one-bite-free state. But seeing as it attacked Mr. Thorne, you're lucky he's not pressing charges. I suggest you take your dog and your squatter and move on before you cause any more trouble." Cutter looked at the man. He saw the calculation in his eyes, the deep-seated corruption that came from years of looking the other way for the right price. He knew this was a dead end. "We're done here," Cutter said, standing up. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, guiding her out of the office. As they left, Brody called after them. "And Cutter, don't go making waves. The water's deep out here. You could drown." It was a threat, plain and simple. The system wasn't just broken, it was owned. The intimidation escalated, just as Thorne had promised. It was subtle at first. A high-end drone would appear at dawn, hovering over the ghost town. A single malevolent eye in the sky. It recorded everything. Then came the nights. Headlights would cut through the darkness. A truck parking at the edge of Cutter's property line, its high beams aimed directly at the sheriff's office where he slept, or the cabin where Lily stayed. They would stay for hours, in silent, luminous siege, before driving off just before dawn. Vandalism followed. One morning they awoke to find the windows of the old general store smashed, the words "Get Out" spray-painted across the door. It was juvenile, but the message was clear. There was no place you are safe. Lily grew more withdrawn. The flicker of hope in her eyes was dimming, replaced by the familiar shadow of fear. She spent her days inside the small cabin, Thor always by her side. The dog had become her constant guardian, his presence a warm, reassuring weight against the crushing anxiety. Cutter knew he had to break the cycle of fear. He took Lily with him on his supply runs to Red Rock, refusing to let her be a prisoner. It was on one of these trips that Thorne escalated from psychological to physical. They were in the town's only grocery store. Cutter was in the back, grabbing a bag of dog food, while Lily was near the front, picking out some vegetables. Two of Thorne's ranch hands, The same two from the first day, cornered her in the aisle. They didn't touch her, not at first. They just stood there, blocking her path, their smirks filled with menace. "Look what we have here," one of them said. "The little ghost. You lost?" Lily tried to push past them, her face pale. "Leave me alone." The second man put a hand on her shopping basket, stopping her. "Mr. Thorne is a patient man, but his patience is running out. Your new friend can't protect you everywhere." Cutter came around the corner. He didn't say a word. He simply took the basket from Lily's hand and set it on the floor. He stepped between her and the two men. "We were just talking," the first man said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Cutter looked at him. "The conversation is over." The man, emboldened by the public setting, puffed out his chest. "Or what, Grandpa?" Cutter's movement was a blur. He didn't throw a punch. He simply stepped forward, his right hand shooting out and gripping the man's throat. He didn't squeeze hard, just enough to get his attention. He used his momentum to walk the man backward, pinning him against a shelf of canned goods. Cans of peaches rattled, and a few fell to the floor. The man's eyes went wide with panic. He clawed at Cutter's hand, but it was like trying to pry off a steel clamp. Cutter leaned in close, his voice a low whisper that no one else could hear. "This is your only warning. The next time I see you or your friend anywhere near her, I will not be this gentle. Do you understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He released the man, who stumbled back, gasping for air, his face a mask of fear and shock. Cutter turned to the other man, who had his hands up, already backing away. Without another word, Cutter picked up the basket, took Lily by the arm, and walked to the checkout counter. The entire store was silent, all eyes on them. He paid for his groceries in cash and walked out, leaving the two ranch hands standing in the aisle amidst the fallen cans of peaches. Driving back to Solitude, the silence in the Jeep was heavy. Cutter knew this was just the beginning. Thorne would not be deterred by a simple confrontation. He was a man who used power, not fists. He would use the law, money, and influence to crush them. Cutter was a warrior, but this wasn't a battlefield he could win with force alone. He was one man against a corrupt and powerful system. He was one man. But he was not alone. That night, under a star-dusted sky, Cutter sat on his porch and made a call on the sat phone. The number was memorized. A string of digits burned into his brain. It rang twice before a voice answered, a voice as calm and steady as his own. "It's been a while, John." "Reaper," Cutter said, "I need a favor." There was no hesitation on the other end of the line. "Name it." "I'm in a town called Solitude, Nevada. I'm sending you the coordinates. I have a situation here. A man named Marcus Thorne. I need everything you can find on him. Financials, legal, personal. The dirtier, the better." "Consider it done," Reaper said. "You sound different." "Things are complicated," Cutter admitted. "Are you compromised?" "No, but I'm loud, and I need to get quiet again. I need eyes and ears." "I'll pack a kit," Reaper said, "and I'll call Doc. He's been getting bored working stateside. ETA 36 hours. "Thank you," Cutter said, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "We don't leave people behind, John," Reaper said, the unspoken words not again hanging in the silence. "Watch your six." The line went dead. Cutter looked out at the dark, silent shapes of the ghost town. The odds were still long. The fight was still uphill. But now, the team was coming. 32 hours later, a nondescript panel van pulled up the dusty trail to Solitude. Two men got out. The first, Reaper, was lean and wiry, with a restless energy and eyes that seemed to be taking in a dozen things at once. The second, Doc, was built like a heavyweight boxer, with a calm, reassuring demeanor that had stitched up seals on more beaches and in more jungles than he could count. There were no handshakes or emotional greetings, just a nod of mutual understanding. They had been through the fire together. Nothing more needed to be said. Reaper immediately set to work. Within hours, he had a network of motion-activated cameras and listening devices deployed around the perimeter of the town. He set up a command center in the old general store, his laptops casting a blue glow in the dusty darkness. He turned the ghost town into a fortress of information. "Thorne's got deep pockets," Reaper reported that first night, his fingers flying across a keyboard. "He's leveraged to the hilt, buying up land with money from some very shady investors. He's got Sheriff Brody on a monthly retainer, paid out through a shell corporation. He's a bully, but he's a smart one. He covers his tracks." Doc, meanwhile, had spoken with Lily. He had a gift for talking to people, for making them feel safe. He treated Thor's healing ribs, his gentle hands calming the anxious dog. He listened to Lily's story, not as a soldier or a medic, but as a human being. "She's a strong kid," he told Cutter later. "Stronger than she knows, but she's been worn down to a nub. Thorne has been doing this to her family for years, tried to force her grandfather out. After he passed, he turned his full attention to her. The pieces were coming together. The what was clear. The how to fight it was the problem. Reaper found the next piece of the puzzle. There's a reporter, Sarah Jenkins, local paper. She's been writing articles about Thorne's land acquisitions for 2 years. Nothing has ever stuck, but she's been a thorn in his side. She might have more." Cutter met Jenkins in a diner 2 towns over. She was sharp, intense, and deeply cynical. She had been fighting Thorne on paper for years and had nothing to show for it, but a file cabinet full of dead ends and a series of thinly veiled threats from Thorne's lawyers. "You're the guy from the ghost town," she said, sizing him up over a cup of coffee. "You made quite a splash at the grocery store." "I need your help," Cutter said simply. "We have the same enemy." He told her about Lily, about the assault, about the corrupt sheriff. He didn't tell her about his background or about his team, but she saw the professionalism, the quiet confidence. She saw that he was different. "Thorne's insulated," she said, shaking her head. "Every time I get close, witnesses suddenly forget what they saw. Documents go missing. People are too scared to talk." "We're not scared," Cutter said. Jenkins looked at him for a long moment, a spark of her old, crusading fire returning to her eyes. "I know of another family, the Garcias. Thorne forced them off their ranch 5 years ago, drove them into bankruptcy. They were silenced with a non-disclosure agreement, but I know they have proof of his tactics. Maybe if they knew they weren't alone, they'd be willing to talk." The final piece of the alliance fell into place through Jenkins. She knew a lawyer, Ben Carter, a former Marine JAG officer who had set up a small practice specializing in helping veterans. He had a reputation as a pit bull, a man who loved a righteous fight, especially against a bully. Cutter and Carter met in Carter's cluttered office. Like the others, there was an instant recognition, a shared understanding forged in the military. "I've gone up against Thorne's legal team before," Carter said, leaning forward on his desk. "They're snakes. They use SLAPP suits to bury people in paperwork and debt until they give up. But their tactics are sloppy. If the Garcias will talk, if Lily will testify, and if you have hard evidence of the corruption, we might be able to build a RICO case. We could take down the whole damn enterprise." The team was assembled. The soldier, the tech, the medic, the journalist, and the lawyer. A network of the righteous. They began to build their case, piece by painstaking piece. Reaper dug deeper into Thorne's finances, following the money. Jenkins and Carter drove out to meet the Garcia family, who, after hearing Lily's story, tearfully agreed to break their silence. They had kept records, voicemails, threatening letters. Cutter focused on Lily. He taught her how to be aware of her surroundings. He taught her that her voice mattered. He saw the fear in her eyes begin to recede, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. She was no longer just a victim. She was becoming a survivor. But Thorne was not a man to sit idle. He felt the tide turning against him. He saw the new vehicles in the ghost town, the defiance in Cutter's eyes. His arrogance couldn't comprehend a force that couldn't be bought or intimidated. And that made him angry. It made him reckless. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Cutter, Reaper, and Doc had gone into town to meet with Carter, leaving Lily behind in solitude. She had insisted on staying. "This is my home," she had said, a new strength in her voice. "I'm not running anymore." Thor stayed with her, a silent, furry shadow. Thorne must have been watching, waiting for an opportunity. The attack was swift and brutal. He didn't send his men this time. He came himself with his 2 thugs, consumed by a narcissistic rage that Cutter had dared to defy him. The motion sensors went off, pinging Reaper's phone, but they were 40 minutes away. Lily was outside, tending to a small, resilient patch of desert flowers her grandmother had planted, when Thorne's truck skidded to a halt. Thor was instantly on his feet, planting himself between her and the men, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. "Last chance, you little brat," Thorne snarled, getting out of the truck. He held a thick wooden handle, part of an old axe or a sledgehammer. "Sign the papers, or I'll tear this entire place down around you." "Get off my land," Lily said, her voice trembling but firm. Her defiance snapped the last thread of Thorne's control. He lunged forward. Thor met him with a ferocious bark, but one of the thugs was ready. He swung a heavy length of chain, catching the dog across the back. Thor yelped and fell, but struggled back up, trying to protect her. Thorne shoved past the wounded animal and grabbed Lily. He threw her to the ground. She fought back, scratching, kicking, landing a deep, gouging scratch down his cheek. He roared in pain and fury. He raised the wooden handle and brought it down. The first blow glanced off her shoulder. The second hit her in the side. She cried out, curling into a ball. He hit her again, and again. The world went dark. When Cutter's Jeep roared back into Solitude, the scene was one of devastating silence. Thorne and his men were gone. Thor was lying near the cabin, whining, a bloody welt across his back. But he was alive. It was Thor who led them to Lily. She was unconscious, lying in the dirt by the withered flowers. Her face was bruised and swollen, her breathing shallow. Doc was at her side in an instant, his hands moving with practiced urgency, assessing the damage. "Multiple broken ribs," he said, his voice grim. "Possible concussion, internal bleeding. We have to get her to a hospital, now." Cutter knelt beside her. He looked at her battered form, at the dirt caked on her tear-streaked face. He saw the small, brave patch of flowers she had been tending. He looked at his loyal dog, injured for a second time while protecting an innocent. Something inside him broke. The part of him that had sought peace, the part that had tried to leave the war behind, died in that moment. It was replaced by something cold, something hard, something utterly without mercy. The dormant warrior was fully awake. He stood up and looked at Reaper. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it was colder than a winter grave. "The rules have changed," he said. "He tried to kill her. The by-the-book approach is over." He pulled out his sat phone. "Get her stable, Doc. Reaper, I want every asset you have focused on Thorne's personal network. I want to know where he is right now." He turned and walked toward the sheriff's office, his face set like granite. Reaper looked at Doc, who was carefully preparing Lily for transport. "I haven't seen him like this since Kandahar," Reaper said softly. "Thorne just signed his own death warrant," Doc replied, not looking up from his work. "He just doesn't know it yet." Cutter walked into the old general store, the team's makeshift command center. The blue light from the monitors cast long shadows on the walls. "Where is he?" Cutter asked. Reaper pointed to a screen. A blinking red dot showed Thorne's location. "His estate, north of here. He's having a party tonight, some fundraiser for his local political action committee. The whole corrupt county leadership will be there. Sheriff Brody, a couple of county commissioners. It's a nest of vipers." Cutter stared at the screen. He saw the layout of the estate, the security cameras, the access points. His mind, trained for a decade to plan and execute, started working. "The DNA," he said suddenly, looking at Reaper. "She scratched him. She told me she did." Reaper's eyes lit up. "If we can get a sample from him to match, it's physical evidence. It puts him at the scene." "No," Cutter said. "We're not waiting for a warrant that will never come. We're not waiting for a legal system that he owns. We're ending this. Tonight." He turned to Reaper. "That digital evidence you found? The financial records? The bribes to Brody? Is it ready?" "I've got it all packaged," Reaper said. "A nice little video file. The greatest hits of Marcus Thorne's criminal career." "Good," Cutter said. He looked at the details for the fundraiser. It was being held in a large outdoor pavilion on Thorne's property, complete with a stage and a large projection screen for his presentation. A plan formed. Cold, precise, final. "There's a town hall meeting in Red Rock tomorrow," Cutter said. "Thorne is the keynote speaker. He's going to announce his new resort development." Reaper nodded. "I saw that." "That's our public forum," Cutter said. "Ben Carter and Sarah Jenkins will be there. I need you to get that video file to them, and I need you to find a way to get it on that projector screen in the middle of his speech." Reaper grinned. "Hijacking the AV for a town meeting? That's insulting how easy that is." "And I need one more thing," Cutter said, his eyes locking with Reaper's. "I need a distraction at Thorne's party tonight. Something big enough to get him and Sheriff Brody out of the house and on the road, but something that doesn't hurt anyone." Reaper's grin widened. "I have some ideas." While Reaper worked his digital magic, Cutter made another call. To Deputy Miller, the one young, honest cop Sarah Jenkins had identified in Brody's department. A kid who joined the force for the right reasons and was slowly being suffocated by the corruption around him. Cutter had met with him once, discreetly. He had seen the frustration in the young man's eyes. "It's time to pick a side, Deputy," Cutter said into the phone. "I'm giving you a chance to be the kind of cop you thought you were going to be. I'm going to hand you Marcus Thorne and Sheriff Brody, gift-wrapped. All you have to do is be at the town hall tomorrow with a set of cuffs and a state trooper you can trust." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, a quiet, determined voice. "I'm in." The plan was in motion. Doc had gotten Lily to a hospital in the next county, registering her under a false name. She was stable, the doctor said. She was a fighter. That night, as the champagne flowed at Thorne's lavish estate, a small, expertly placed charge ignited the propane tank for the estate's backup generator. The explosion was loud but contained, a massive fireball that lit up the night sky but was far from any structures. It looked spectacular. It looked terrifying. Calls flooded the 911 dispatch. Sheriff Brody, eager to show his patron how useful he was, raced to the scene with Thorne himself. It was exactly the distraction Cutter needed. While they were gone, a figure dressed in black slipped onto the estate. Not to steal, not to harm, but to collect. A whiskey glass from Thorne's study, a few strands of hair from a brush in his bathroom, the DNA sample. It was delivered to a trusted contact of Doc's at a state crime lab before the sun came up. The next day, the Red Rock Town Hall was packed. The air was thick with anticipation. Marcus Thorne, his face adorned with a piece of gauze covering a long scratch on his cheek, took the stage to thunderous applause from his supporters. He was the king in his castle. He began his speech, his voice smooth and confident, painting a picture of prosperity, of jobs, of a bright future under his leadership. Sarah Jenkins sat in the front row, her pen poised. Ben Carter stood in the back, his arms crossed. Deputy Miller and 2 state troopers stood quietly by the exit, their presence barely noticed. Thorne gestured to the large screen behind him. "And now, I'd like to show you what this future looks like." The screen flickered, but it wasn't an architect's rendering of a resort that appeared. It was grainy, hidden camera footage. The audio was clear. It was Thorne, in his office, handing a thick envelope of cash to Sheriff Brody. "Just make the problem go away, Sheriff." Thorne's voice echoed through the shocked silence. "I don't care how." The scene changed. Financial ledgers appeared, showing illegal transfers, bribes, money laundering. Then, a recorded phone call, Thorne threatening the Garcia family. The room was dead silent. Thorne's face went from confusion to pale, horrified recognition. He frantically motioned to the technicians, but the screen was no longer under their control. Then a new image filled the screen, a photo of Lily, unconscious in a hospital bed, her face a tapestry of bruises. A collective gasp went through the crowd, and then a figure walked slowly toward the stage. It was Lily. She was wrapped in bandages, her arm in a sling, but she was walking on her own. She took the microphone from the podium as Thorne stood frozen in shock. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the hall. "My name is Lily, and that man," she said, pointing a trembling finger at Thorne, "did this to me. He did it because I wouldn't give him my home. He tried to silence me, but I am not scared of you anymore." Chaos erupted. In that moment, Deputy Miller and the state troopers moved forward. "Marcus Thorne," Miller's voice rang out, clear and steady, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, bribery, and conspiracy." They cuffed him on the stage, in front of the whole town, his arrogant empire crumbling to dust in the space of 5 minutes. Another trooper moved to a stunned Sheriff Brody and placed him under arrest as well. Justice had arrived. Not quietly, in a courtroom, but loudly for all to see. The trials were swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The video, the financial records, the DNA match from the whiskey glass, the testimony of Lily and the Garcia family, and a dozen other people who found their courage once Thorne's power was broken. Marcus Thorne and his entire network were dismantled. He and Sheriff Brody received the maximum sentences. The news reports called it the fall of a tyrant. For Cutter, it was simply a promise kept. A few weeks later, a young man came out to the ghost town. He was one of Thorne's ranch hands, a kid who had been there during the intimidation, a silent bystander. He found Cutter on the porch of the sheriff's office, watching Thor chase a lizard in the dust. I wanted to say I'm sorry, the young man stammered. For what he did. For not doing anything to stop it. I was a coward. Cutter looked at him for a long moment. Courage isn't about not being afraid, he said quietly. It's about doing the right thing even when you are. Don't be a coward next time. The young man nodded, tears in his eyes, and left. The ghost town of Solitude was no longer empty. It was filled with a new kind of life. Cutter, with the help of Ben Carter and a surprising amount of community donations that poured in after the story broke, had started a foundation. He was using the vast, empty land to create a sanctuary, a place to rescue and train shelter dogs to become service animals for veterans suffering from trauma. It was a new mission, a way to build instead of break, a way to find his own peace by giving it to others, both man and dog. The final quiet moment came at the end of a long day. The sun was setting, bleeding across the desert sky. Cutter sat on the porch. Lily sat beside him, the physical scars fading, the light back in her eyes. She was studying online, planning to become a victim's advocate. She had found her voice and wanted to help others find theirs. Thor, fully healed, lay at their feet, his head resting on Cutter's boot. He sighed, a deep, contented sound. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They just watched the sky as the last light of day faded, leaving the first stars to burn brightly in the deep, peaceful dark. The warrior had finally found his solitude, not in the emptiness of a ghost town, but in the quiet fullness of a promise fulfilled, a life saved, and a purpose reclaimed. The storm was over, and in the calm that followed, there was finally and truly peace.